couch? You gonna the couch, buddy?
Right here. Do not come past
the couch. With the other Vice the couch, JD Vance, go the couch.
So, two suspicious things about that clip of JD Vance and Stephen Miller walking through Union Station. One, JD Vance is asked if he is going to have sex with the couch. And you'll notice that despite given multiple opportunities, he never denies it. He never denies it. And then when it goes from questions to go F a couch, do you see how fast JD Vance is walking? Almost as if he's got a hot little love seat waiting for him wherever he's going. I'm not saying that after that video he had coitus with a couch. I'm just saying he's doing all of the things that you would do if that was actually what was going on. No, the reality though is probably a little bit darker. They're going to see how they can F over DC. They're there in the city to make the lives of the people that live there more difficult, to do some performative fascism, to placate their base. That's what JD Vance is there for. And I'd like to thank JD Vance for at least for a day not being on vacation. That's a nice change of pace. But Stephen Miller apparently took it a little bit more seriously than Vance, or at the very least, Stephen Miller didn't have the ability to relax with a couch. So he's still really pent up, and here is how he lashed out afterward.
All these demonstrators that you've seen out here in recent days, all of these elderly white hippies, they're not part of the city and never have been. And by the way, most of the citizens who live in Washington, D.C. are black. This is not a city that has had any safety for its black citizens for generations. So we're going to ignore these stupid white hippies that all need to go home and take a nap because they're all over 90 years old. I'm glad they're here today. Because me, Pete, and the vice president are all going to leave here, and inspired by them, we're going to add thousands more resources to this city.
So first off, Steve Miller, great suit, totally works with your complexion, no notes, keep dressing like that. Second of all, how much does he love an opportunity to pretend that he has an issue with white people? He's like throwing that at all these white hippie. Oh, I don't like white people. There's a few issues with what he was saying right there. First of all, they need to go take a nap because they're over 90. But they're not sleepy, they're protesting. You get it? You know, Donald Trump is falling asleep during basically every cabinet hearing he has. Those guys are there yelling at you. You're pretending that they're sleepy. They don't seem particularly sleepy though. You seem a little bit emotional. Maybe you need to take a nap. Also, the idea that you can't protest in DC if you're white, that's an interesting take. They've never really seemed all that welcoming towards protests by people of color, so I don't know what it is that you're supposed to be to protest. But also, he needs to catch up a little bit on the demographics of DC, because while DC has historically been very black in terms of demographics, thanks to decades of gentrification and all that, it's actually pretty split at this point. 42.5% of the population are black or African American, 36.6% are white or non-Hispanic. I don't know why Stephen Miller needs to hear this, and I would conclude by saying that the more important number, as he's standing there pretending to speak for black DC residents, is they don't want him there. They don't want the Nazi, they don't want the couch effer, they don't want the National Guard. When you ask them, which the Trump regime never did, people in Washington are very clear. 69% strongly oppose taking control of the streets, 10% also somewhat opposed. That is 79% opposition. So whether you're talking to the white hippies or whatever, don't pretend to speak for the people of DC. They've been very clear. And let me just say one more thing in regards to that. So there's this big meta argument about when Donald Trump claims a thing that's untrue, like DC's in a crisis mode for crime. You Democrats don't fall into the trap of like siding with reality. No, you always have to just bow down to the rhetoric of the fascists because you don't want to seem to be like not caring about crime or whatever. Why don't you understand the perspective of the people on the ground, you elitists? Well, it seems like the opinion of the people on the ground is they don't want the National Guard there. They don't seem to think that it's necessary. They don't want CBP or Border Patrol or the FBI or the DEA or any. They don't want them on the streets. So maybe they acknowledge that there's some crime, which again, everyone saying that Trump is lying about the numbers also acknowledges the crime that's actually there. We've actually covered the statistics, but the people of DC are saying it does not merit the invasion, okay? And so we should at least be able to agree on that before, getting into all the specifics. But Yaz, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I don't know why Republicans go out in public at all anymore at this point. We were talking earlier about how GOP representatives are constantly being booed and heckled at town hall events. And it is like rough out there for a Republican these days. I'm surprised that they're even still doing those town hall events. And they were actually, it was suggested by the Republican Party for them to just stop doing them altogether because they get a lot of bad press for it. But then, they always find a way to kind of, swing the story in their direction. I don't think it actually works very well for them. Even JD Vance, like he gets booed while he's on vacation in other countries. It's one thing to get booed when you're here at Disneyland or in Ohio and messing with the rivers and all that. But whenever he travels abroad, he still gets booed. Remember when he went to Greenland and he only lasted a few hours before he had to come back to the US because they did not want him there? That was impressive. But it's also weird because the left always gets a lot of flack for racializing issues that the right believes are not inherently racial. So their argument is that we're the ones who are actually racist, not them. But as a leftist, a Democrat, whatever, I'm not sure why Stephen Miller is even bringing up race in that particular instance, right? I don't get his argument, and I'm not buying the angle that he's suddenly looking out for black people because who is believing that, right? I'm not black, so I can't speak for that community, but I'm going to presume that they don't need him or want him as their protector. Not that man, not in that suit.
Yeah, I'm not gonna speak for them either, but I would imagine the only person they'd less want to speak for them is probably Stephen Miller. If I had to guess. By the way, people are throwing out some numbers. I'm doing a little bit of research. We'll cover this tomorrow. But all the different cities in the Republican Congress, people that represent them that have far, far higher murder rates. Baton Rouge and a number of other ones. We'll dive into. American Prospect has a great write-up on it. We'll talk about that. But again, I believe in standing for actual facts. I believe also one of the reasons I can't go 5 minutes without citing a poll is I care what people actually think about this sort of thing. And I'm not simply gonna defer, hide reality just because a fascist got aggressive or whatever. I don't think that historically bowing down to fascism has often resulted in good outcomes.
If you enjoyed that, then make sure that you never miss another video by subscribing. And if you want a little more, consider hitting the join button and becoming a member. So you're probably wondering, why would I do that? Well, when you do that, you get access to bonus content that I make every single week, and it's a lot of fun. You get custom emojis and more. If you join at tier 3, by the way, you even get access to a monthly member hangout with myself. And you'll get all that going forward, but you'll also unlock years of the back catalog that is literally 100 or more bonus clips and top 10 lists and debates and more. So what are you waiting for?